we hear about, people that campaign in the aisle and lobbyists, but where does it come from? Where did this whole style of sort of clandestine politics come from? I had to go back to very basics. It's funny, whenever you delving or going into the history of politics, modern day politics, roads always seem to end back here in the UK, which is quite interesting.
Always, I'm telling you.
Always veer back.
Yeah.
The phrase lobbying comes from the gathering of members of parliament and peers in the hallways or lobbies of the Houses of Parliament before and after parliamentary debates. The now defunct UK Public Affairs Council defined lobbying as in a professional capacity attempting to influence or advising those who wish to influence the UK government, parliament, and devolved legislatures or administrations, regions or local government or other public bodies on any matter within their competence. So during the 1800s, petitions were a popular way of raising issues with Parliament, and in 1839, nearly 14,000 public petitions were presented on more than 90 different subjects, with a total of over 4.5 million signatures. In 1866, a group of suffragists, I was quite clear with that, not suffragettes, but suffragists, unsuccessfully petitioned and lobbied Parliament that women should have the same political rights as men. Then in 1903, the suffragettes, whose motto was deeds, not words, they heckled ministers, displayed banners, and used both violent and non-violent direct action so that they could have equal voting rights for women. And this was subsequently then achieved in 1928. Forwarding again to 1923, Winston Churchill, who we know as one of the most prominent prime ministers this country has ever had, acted as a highly paid lobbyist for Burma Oil to persuade the British government to allow Burma to have exclusive rights to Persian, Iraqi oil resources, which they were successful in granting. So the history of lobbying, campaigning is not something that was only within the American halls of their Congress. This is something that has been done quite extensively here in the UK for hundreds of years, which is quite interesting. I don't know if you was aware of that, but it's something that I always thought was something that was not done in the UK, but was mostly done in America. So I would look at them and go, their democracy is useless. They don't do it, when actually we've always done it.
We've always been doing it, yeah.
Which is quite interesting.
And how far back did you go in terms of?
So in terms of the modern day lobbying, this goes back to the very early, so sort of 1800.
Yeah, okay.
So we're talking.
That's what I saw, yeah.
Yeah, so this is, well over 200 years in the making of being able to have a quiet word with a elected member of parliament and have your own say or what you would like to get across, maybe for a little bit of a financial support for your campaign or whatever else it could be.
Yeah,
you would then be able to have your ideas read out in the house. So it's quite interesting, and obviously because of that, it kind of makes you think, how does that potentially affect the common person? Because, as I said at the very beginning, rich people control politics. The average poor person doesn't even have the ability to, he can write a letter to his local MP and maybe he may reply to that letter. You could probably go to their constitutional home and ask for an audience, and they may say, yeah, you can come and book you in for 2 weeks. These lobbyists are in, as it were, the hallway of the heart of UK and American and obviously other countries' politics, and have a direct channel of conversation. We don't have that.
Normally the way that we try and do things is look at the good, then look at the bad, and then come to a conclusion.
Yes.
Yeah, I struggled with the good section. I really struggled with the good section.
It would all depend on what is the person who is lobbying trying to gain. What will they be trying to gain? If they are trying to gain for the greater good, then yeah, guess what? There's lots of things that are for the greater good. But if you, let's just say you're a very wealthy
charities,
person, if you're a very wealthy person, and you want to back the changing of how charities are regulated, you can use your money and your access for greater good. And that's a very noble thing. On the flip side to that, if you are representing a maybe not so positive thing for the UK common person, but you still have access to the house, what then would happen? And that's where I think a big chunk of our conversation falls into that hole of, well, what happens then? How is it balanced out? And it's very, very interesting. And there's quite a few things that I want us to talk about throughout this conversation, especially when it comes to how governments work, our impressions of how governments work, because obviously we believe that our voice has a say and that we dictate what a member of parliament, what he will do. Well, what if what we want doesn't go in line with what someone who maybe a lobbyist says? Then obviously money talks, right? I mean, what's your take on that?
I think we touched on this before. I think when we was talking about politics, and I think one of the things that came out of it was, what are they here to do?
Yeah.
Who are they here to serve? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that somebody, let's say, for example, a water company wishes to get rid of sewage, and you found out that they had paid, I don't know, 100 grand for lunch with David Cameron or Boris Johnson or whatever the case may be. I know they've supposed that, I think they got to declare all of these meetings and stuff like that, but doesn't that have more sway over all of the constituents in the area of which is being polluted? Because I think I sent you something yesterday where now in South London there's been a number of incidences where people are talking about they're falling sick after drinking tap water. So this is not an isolated incident was it Brixham or wherever it was? So my concern is obviously the fairness. There doesn't appear to be any type of fairness, and if you're telling me that one donor can outweigh an entire village or town or something, then what is democracy? Do we have it? If and money seems to rule everything around us. So from my point of view, is it good? Yes, like you said, I think there are some examples, like I don't know if Marcus Rashford lobbied the government about the free schools. Something like that would be an example of a good example of this. But that's usually like one case in a sea of unknown faces that work in corporations that have got lobby groups in central London, in Mayfair, think tanks and all these sort of political research policy groups. It's a little bit I want to say shady, even though it's within the rules. They're allowed to do this, right?
Well, the thing is that especially, and I know we've mentioned this in quite a few videos, that in an election year that becomes more apparent, especially when it comes to the amount of money that is sloshing around in those halls, because There was a time when an MP would go door knocking to trump up support. He would or hire a vehicle with a tannoy and go down each street shouting out his political mandate and telling the general public what his, I'll fight for you to stop, this happening, or I will do this for you on your behalf. The fact that they're old school, this is a political party that has gone back to its roots, which how it used to be, door knocking and speaking directly to the people. But then if we look across, the Atlantic, we see that the whole promoting of your politics is something that costs money. You've replaced the door knocking and the tannoy with, on a vehicle with advertising and with
lots of it.
Lots of advertising and strategically going on to TV shows or being part of discussions, which obviously you may not necessarily have had, you in your own right could not afford to do this. And in many cases, the person who spends the most on their advertising themselves is the one that maybe wins at the end. I mean, it's not always a case, but if you have a lot of money in your war chest, you can spend money on big events, big conventions, advertising. You can do all of that to get your message across. So in the UK, there was actually a cap on how much you could spend as part of your election campaign. They've raised it from 19 million to 35 million. So that's a big jump, from 19 million to 35 million. And at the same time, they've also increased the amount donors can give without it being made public. Now, this is something that's quite interesting. The governments have changed, the changes to this law has massive ramifications when it comes to what we can see as members of the public and what actually happens. So the idea that donors can remain anonymous and can help your campaign, well, then that becomes quite worrying. The case in point is someone, let's just say, for instance, our current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who is an extremely wealthy man, very, very wealthy. I've heard, his father is a billionaire. His wife has maybe 700 million or whatever it is that they have. There's a lot of money that they have available to them. And they now have the ability to use donor money to help their campaign, and it can remain anonymous. It's also been announced that political parties might be exempt from actually even the UK data protection laws to stop unrestricted use of personal data in elections. The Financial Times reported that the government is paving the way for UK political parties to bombard voters with unsolicited calls, texts, and emails ahead of the next general election through these changes to the data protection laws. So keeping in mind that not only are donors going to be able to remain anonymous, the amount of money they pay is also going to circumvent the data protection laws. And this is all coming in the last,
I was just going to say, how long ago did they change this?
This is conservative recent.
Oh, of course.
So if you think ahead, as we said, we currently have a billionaire prime minister, a billionaire. We've had very rich prime ministers. I mean, what I find interesting, and I heard this on a podcast this morning, was when obviously Rishi Sunak released his financials to the world. He earns 200,000-300,000 as a prime minister, and he quoted that he earns £2 million outside of that. And this one particular YouTuber, he said, well,
I saw that.
Pretty much impossible if you've got £700 million.
Mm-hmm.
Even the interest on that,
at
a conservative level of, I think he actually said 500 million, but he said at a conservative level that would still be £5 million of passive income earning. So it's very.
I think he said as well. Combined him, his wife, and the father-in-law, they earn $3 million a week. In passive income alone.
Yeah. So what he's done is all above board. Rishi Sunak hasn't done anything illegal.
No, of course.
Because obviously his assets may well be in property, maybe in stock, maybe in shares, and so not necessarily needed to be declared in the same way that you and I would need to declare our financials. But the idea is that now that we know that as a political power, you will be able to increase the amount of money that can be used for your election campaign. Donors will be able to give you even more, and it won't necessarily be found out by us. You know, even if we go through the data protection laws and whatnot, we won't be able to find that out.
It's a little disturbing, right?
It is very worrying because for you and I, that means that for a political party that we may not necessarily agree with could actually win. Do you know, the reality is that is the reality, that a political party who may not necessarily be loved by the general mass, who may not necessarily be, you know, we may have had enough of this political party, we may want them out, we may have had enough of them, but because of the donors and the campaign ceiling being raised, they have enough clout, financial clout, to bombard us with text messages, emails, phone calls, you know, boots on the ground, knocking at your door, to the point where they can sell a message. You know, we will do this for you. We will make sure that this is taken care of. And it could almost sound believable.
It sounds like the last 14 years.
Exactly. And so there are certain things that you and I would say, yeah, I agree with that. I think that's really good. And we get amnesia of the last 14 years. And we'll think, yeah, that's great, when this is all part of the financial machine that is controlling politics. And obviously that's what we bring it back to, that so let me carry on what I wrote here, was that groups such as the Law Commission, the Committee on Standards in Public Life, and the Electoral Commission have all said that the biggest change that the government has made to election years in the last 4 years is to introduce a restrictive photo voters ID scheme, which was designated to fix an almost non-existent problem. So obviously around the world, there's always been talk about potentially, you know, rigging the voting system. And obviously voting fraud is a no-no. And so we implemented this system with photo voter ID, which seems perfectly fine. But since 2019, there has only been 2 proven cases of ID fraud. So you realize this is not, you know, we're not in.
That's not the problem. That's not the problem that they're solving, is it?
Yeah. But with this photo ID system, it makes tens of thousands of people ineligible to vote. It literally wipes out tens of thousands of people. Because
who are those people most likely to vote for?
And there we go. Potentially those people who may not necessarily be able to get onto the photo voter ID scheme, but would still be eligible to vote, where would their vote go? And it's very, very interesting. Again, this is where money talks, because when this was put through, this was championed by companies that produce, you know, voter electoral ID machines. It was in their best interests. For them, this is a no-brainer. Oh yeah, of course, we want to rule out voter ID fraud, where it says that there's been 2 cases in the UK in 2019, 2 cases. So I know that without going down the rabbit hole with conspiracy theories, the idea of creating the problem, fixing the problem, which was never really a problem, has then now, we thought at the beginning, we thought this was a great idea, seemed like perfect sense. We'd already heard of problems in other countries, say America, or other countries where there was potential voter fraud going on, and we said, oh no, we don't want that. We need to make sure we protect ourselves from it. But now, when you actually look at the details, you realize that thousands of people have instantly just been wiped off and are now unable to vote.
But what's interesting,
it's very, very interesting, and as we've always said, whatever we talk about on the show, there's always more that could have been discussed. It's just the time. We're just not able to get into the meat of those kind of discussions.
Do you think that is why Labour are pledging, as soon as they get in, that they're going to make 16 and 17-year-olds eligible for the vote?
100%.
Because then that's going to literally just cancel that out, isn't it? I
think as well, and obviously this is just my own political opinion. It's not the same as LD's. It's just mine. I do feel now that the political parties are being separated by age, because the ruling party currently is catering for, the businessman, the homeowner, the rich oligarch. It's a very much a separation, and I believe that the younger generation do not respect or like how things are right now, because they are not in the game. They're not part of it. They have become the unwitted victims.
Yeah.
And so why would they vote to perpetuate and continue this nonsense? And so that would instantly mean, why not? They are a part of it. They have an opinion. They definitely are being impacted by the decisions of old people. And so that's why I think, if any political party has any common sense, it will try and get the young vote very early by promising them everything they can to get into power, and hopefully sticking up to it, because they'll be held accountable. But I think that. But
do you remember the Lib Dems tried that, didn't they? And then they stabbed the
got
young
in
in the back,
purposes, didn't they? Because it was a hung parliament, and so the things they wanted to do, they were unable to do because they were hitched to a bigger party. And it softened the Conservatives slightly, but not enough. And then at the next election, because the momentum was there, the Conservatives were able to go outright and kick the Lib Dems to the curb. And the Lib Dems have never recovered from that, because now they're tainted as having, got into bed with the enemy.
Screwed over the students.
So it's very interesting. So keeping in mind that if this is the case as it is right now, the rich are heavily invested and heavily influencing political strategy. And we've also mentioned that the richest of all of them is currently at the top of the tree.
Why would you go for that job to earn 200 grand a year when you're earning 2 million a year in interest?
Influence. It's almost like, and when I watched the said program that I believe we both watched this morning, the first thing that popped into my head when he mentioned that was a Trojan horse. I just was like, well, you've just described a Trojan horse.
100%.
This is 100% somebody who, on the scheme of things, looks like the average well-to-do person's done well for himself, only makes 2 million, earns his wages, does well, gets in with the troops. But when you sort of peel back
Yep.
the rhetoric and you actually peel back and you realize, oh no, this is an obscenely wealthy man who, how can he in any way relate to the working man on the street?
Really can't.
And more importantly, why would he want to have them on his side when it would be much better for him to have rich benefactors on his side?
Yeah.
And more importantly, if he's voted in, he will need to go through with the promises he made. And those promises he made will not be to, you know, when he tried to put through the smoking bill, on paper, that sounds perfect. It's a great idea. I like it. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a really, really good thing. But it felt to me almost like, look, guys, I need to win. I need to win this election, but I might lose a toe to do it. But I can still walk. But I may need to lose a foot, but I can still walk.
Yep.
In other words, I may need to lose some concessions somewhere. So the smoking lobbyists haven't given me enough money for me to argue their case. So therefore, you guys are falling to the wayside. Yep. I can sacrifice your vote right now because, I don't know, Boeing or someone else, you know, arms deals or whoever it is that is in power or in influence of, you know, power of influence is at the front or is at the dinner table. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And remember, we are in a bit of a free for all at the moment because we're not stuck to Europe. So we're not bound by European constraints in who we do business with or how we do business. The other day, the UK wanted to try and get out of the European Court of Human Rights. There was talk about that. You know, that's a big thing, a protection enshrined in law to protect us from the man. And there was talk about saying, oh, it's outdated and it's no good and we don't need it anymore. And in my head, I just kept thinking, yeah, I don't buy that. I think we need it because what would that mean if we weren't in it? Now, I'm not saying they're going to, you know, grab us and throw us to the next wall and shoot us down. But what I am thinking is, how will that affect our liberty moving forwards? And so again, it becomes a financial thing. And as regular people who slave to the wage, we're not the millionaire person who is doing well. Because if you're a millionaire, why would you not vote for him? If you are rich, why would you not vote for someone who is going to look after the rich? It's a no-brainer. I mean, honestly, it's almost crazy.
But then even when you look at how they get into power and the percentages, they are literally getting in on sort of like 40% of a vote, which is of 40% of the electorate. So when you break down all the numbers, there's less than a third that's running the country. You know, and we need PR, basically, proportional representation.
100%. I wrote here, when you join all the dots together, you see that as we come into this election with spending limits now doubled and more anonymous and overseas donations, and political parties are free to ignore privacy laws, which to me is scary, you realize that this is a very scary time if we don't talk about it. And unless you and I are talking about it right now, and hopefully the viewer who is listening to this now will go, oh, I did not know that. And they can then tell their friends they did not know that. But the problem being is you and I don't have 35 million pounds of a war chest to promote our opinion, to be able to raise the knowledge and raise the alarm to say, guys, girls, people, we are having the rug pulled from under our feet coming up to an election. and we need to do something about it before it's too late. If we don't do it, you know that song from oh, I can't think what they're called now, but the words were, "If you tolerate this, then your children will be next." It's a very well-known song from the, I think it was the 90s, Manic Street Preachers maybe, but it was literally, I mean, there cannot be a more, when you hear that, you realize that's exactly what it is. If we tolerate this and we accept it, the children won't know any different.
I think that we got more grassroots organizations that have sprung up all over the place now, but it's more localized and concentrated in.
And will they ever unify?
Well, that's the next step though, isn't it? So even though there are pods growing up everywhere, then it's to unionize amongst everyone to bring, like, you know, the overall message. But I think it's changing though, even though they are seeming more and more powerful and, I would say, overreaching with these types of laws. I think they're doing that because there is so much in the opposition. I think that's the reason why they're doing it.
I mean, I've mentioned to you, and you know, this may be a little bit of naivete. I talked about the donations in the sense of, oh, I'll give you £1 million, you can print off some pamphlets and put them through someone's door. But that isn't necessarily what this money is being used for. And the first thing I wrote was disinformation. Because keeping in mind that I may not necessarily want to promote my own political persuasions, but I might want to mire yours. I might want to make what you're saying sound nonsensical and stupid. I also want to really pump out or hide the foreign investment. I'm going to make sure you don't know about it. I'm also going to encourage voter disengagement. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that young people don't vote. Not worth it. I could potentially pay people to be anti-establishment. Sorry,
1 second. Do you know what? I'm being slow. You've just dropped something that I think it went over my head.
Go on.
They've made it so that they don't need us or don't want us to know where certain investment is coming from.
Yeah.
And that's coming fresh off the heels of a report. I think it was might be not the Ford report, but there was a report about the Russian influence in politics.
Yeah.
And they haven't even released that report yet.
Yeah.
They've kept that. And so before that even comes out, they've now,
So you start to see,
you can connect the dots. Yeah.
You're connecting the dots.
Yeah.
You've got this concept of, there are lots of people that won't vote because they'll say it's a wasted vote, no point voting. Or many young people that I've spoken to who said none of them represent me. And you do feel like saying, they're not wrong.
True. Yeah.
And then you might get some that will vote as a protest vote. Vote them out anyway. Vote for anybody, but just not them, which is also a point. There are millions, I didn't even realize this, there are millions of people who are not even registered to vote because of the complicated system we have, where they may not get the paper version of their registration sent to their post, to where they live, or it may get lost in the post, or there's a number of things why it doesn't happen. But there's millions and millions of people who won't vote because they can't, and there's some that won't because they just won't vote. Then you also have, and this is probably the biggest thing, and this is arguably the thing where we look across the pond to the Americans when we see how social media is misused. The whole concept of spending, a couple mil to put sponsor a football match or sponsor a game or be the person that has a speech at the front of a public open, there could be a public concert or something like that. These are the kinds of things where, for you and I, if let's just say you and I are Conservative voters and we're members of the Conservative Party, our subscription was meant to go towards forwarding the Conservative way of voting. Yeah. And that was what our subscription, what we pay every month or yearly, however we do it, was meant to go towards, our local MP's next election, which is part of the reason why we still see MPs who've been in their seat for 30 years. And you think, wow, that no one's voted them out. Like, they've been set, it's been a staunch red or a staunch blue seat. And you think, how did that happen? But if they're doing their job and they're ticking the boxes, that's fine. But from what we've just said, your subscription don't mean anything. It means nothing. No. Because your subscription might as well be pocket change, because we're not dealing with small fry local politicians who've come good. It isn't I'm trying to think of the last time I think of someone who was like, local politician come good. Maybe John Smith, who the Labour politician that died before he became Prime Minister. I don't know his background, but I kind of get the impression that he was a Labourite who, came from, the ground up. I don't know. I could be wrong, but
very popular. Yes. Yeah.
But you get what I mean? He was very popular, and then obviously had a heart attack and he died. And then from then on, our politics has always been about popularism. It's always been the biggest gets past the post first. The one with the most money does it. You could put all of the political parties together; they still will not have as much as the Conservatives. They just won't have it. If you have a billionaire, this is what I'm saying. We've been conservative with how much money we think he has. He could well be the richest MP we've ever had, the richest Prime Minister we've ever had.
I think he's definitely up there, if not.
And yet, would you even know it unless we actually delve deep? Because he plays the simple, I'm the common man, I roll my sleeves up. We should have known.
I mean, I said earlier that I don't think he can relate to ordinary people. That's not to say that a billionaire can't. I'm just simply going off of how he acts, like when we watch him in public. He just doesn't. He seems completely out of touch. I think there was footage of him when he was a kid at Winchester.
Yes,
he was like,
what do I know about?
I don't have any. Oh no, not any working class friends. No, I don't know anyone working class. So that's what he grew up in, and he became richer, more entitled, with more power. So So
do you earlier on when I said to you that the spending cap was for elections was £19 million. Just to put things into context, no party in the history of UK government has ever even reached £19 million on an election. Wow. Only the Conservative Party came close to 19 million in 2019. So if it hasn't even breached 19 million in 2019, and they won, remember, 2019 they won, and they got close to 19 million, which was the cap. 5 years later, we are now extending that cap to £35 million. It goes to show you.
And you have to then just say, sorry to cut you, what are you spending this money for if it's not to influence policy and politics?
It
has to be. But they won't give you that as a direct answer. They won't say that. But
it says
it has to.
Where will this extra money, because keeping in mind, if you said, right, you know what, logically we were close to 19 million in 2019. If we were close, I would say with inflation, maybe we need to raise it 25. Maybe we need to raise it a little bit to double it, almost double.
That's crazy.
That shortfall or the money gap is going to come from donors. Like, it's not going to be the UK public go, oh yeah, we'll fork out more money to get you into power. It's going to be the secret donor who will step up, and they will help to take that probably to the 35 million. But my question is, what will they want in return? Because keeping in mind, 1 in 4 voters thought that donors to political parties had the most influence over public policy decisions made by the government. Barely 1 in 20 thought that ordinary voters did. So the people, the mass, are already aware. We're not influencing what's going on here. They are dictating how we live. They are dictating what we do. They are dictating how we are going to raise our families and live and function in the United Kingdom. But it's rich people who are dictating everything we do. How can we win? Why would you try and tell us that there's a chance that you can make it big in this country when the game is already rigged? There is a glass ceiling, and I know obviously we've talked about glass ceilings for people from ethnic minorities and for women and for people with disabilities. There is a glass ceiling for poor. There is a glass ceiling for working class people, because working class and poor are going to soon be one. There won't be a difference. So nothing has robbed the middle class more than this government and what it has done, and it is solely trying to make sure that all of the benefits that the working class people made during the 80s, where they could buy their own home and actually be a stakeholder, they're slowly losing it. It's slowly being sucked away from them. It was a campaign project of Margaret Thatcher, again, a Conservative leader, to try and break the miners, break the trade unions, make them, let's break them, because if they can't strike, if they're going to lose their house. But the trade-off to that was, well, now that they are working, they're going to want more. So we're going to have to give them more. Hence, they got more. Fast forward 20 years, their children are saying, yeah, we want more too. Yeah, about that. Like, that was just an experiment for your parents and your grandparents. Your parents and your parents were the only ones that were ever going to get that kind of, bite of the pie. Yep. Because you're not getting it, because straight away you can't afford even the deposit on a home. We've laden you with debt if you went to university, so you've already got massive debts that you are never going to be able to pay back. We'll give you long periods. Oh yeah, you can pay it for 30 years, but you've got 30 years of debt sitting on your cards for forever. There's no ability for you to get a part of the game unless you have a rich bank of mum and dad. Oh, but by the way, bank of mum and dad took out equity in their home to build the extension, to help their children get on the ladder, and are now in debt. They've got no wiggle room. The only way for them to go now is backwards. Which, crazy. As I see it, is another one of the whole situation. It's gone full circle. So I know in Roman times there were plebs, and I just look at it like we have now gone back to being
feudalism, man. Feudalism,
peasants.
Yeah.
And it's sad. We're peasants with an iPhone.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we just basically have nicer toys now.
No longer do, because, and that's the point. The point is that if you can give them just enough for them not to complain, they won't complain. If you can give them just enough to make them feel like they're doing better. I mean, in what world is someone who earns £50,000, which is a lot of money, not a lot of money,
I was going to
say the point where £50,000, mine and your grandparents, bought their homes for £5,000 because they would have earned maybe £1,000 for the year, if that, or hundreds of pounds. It wasn't thousands, and if you were earning thousands, it was big money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've gone to the stage now with inflation and with the devaluing of our currency, that someone who's earning £50,000 a year now is not even enough to buy a home. It's not, because you still need to have subsequent money for your deposit and to keep going. And it's I'm not saying obviously in the centrals, in the capital, it's like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the further out, there is opportunities for you to get a nice home, and £50,000 in many parts of the country is a good wage.
Yeah.
But if you're in anywhere near any central city in the UK, that will get swallowed up straight away. And when you're thinking of rents, a rental of a two bed, no garden could be up to 1,500, if not more. You suddenly realize that that's not a lot of money at all.
Exactly.
But companies will happily tell you, oh, you're paid really well. But when they then obviously once the government takes their cut out of your tax, and then you get taxed again for the food you buy, you suddenly realize this is not a lot.
It's not stretching, is it? Yep.
So with all of this combined, with all of these things that we've talked about, you start to paint a picture that these rich unknown people, because throughout this whole conversation, we've not mentioned any names, because they're not on the tip of our tongue, but they are donating millions of pounds. And I love the way we call them donors. That in itself is another gaslighting,
isn't it? Yeah, gaslighting.
It's like a gaslighting way of saying, oh, by the way, we can't really call you a lobbyist, because it implies that we're not then impartial. However, if we use the word donor, the average person will go, oh, well, a donor is someone that gives something of themselves to help someone else.
Yes.
If you need a kidney, Lee, you're going to have to go to the hospital, and I'll donate my kidney to you so that we can both live healthy lives. Yeah. And that's for the good of you and I. But a donor isn't doing that. A donor is donating someone else's kidney. And they may not have survived.
Yeah.
Even
exactly.
to you, so that you can do my bidding. And that, to me, is probably what is so worrying, is that, as you said, in many videos, we've always done the positives and the negatives. But when it comes to lobbying, in other words, being able to whisper in the halls and the lobbies of the political powers, this is not about the greater good. This is about how can you,
doesn't appear to be,
with my money, how can you help me to further making more money? How can I get that contract? Why is it that some of the biggest contracts that you ever see getting done?
Do you remember the case? I think it was Robert Jenrick, and they donated. I think it was construction firm donated to him. He's a housing minister. They donated £12,000 to the party.
Yeah, right.
So officially £12,000.
Yeah.
And then his company were awarded contracts, and through policy change, his company saved something like £400 million.
I know we've
for £12,000, really.
For £12,000, yeah, no, it's probably more than that. £12,000 on the books.
Yeah,
there would have been other. So we know we've had like the cash for questions debacle a few years ago. We've had the debacle of what happened during COVID with the face masks. That was another thing where there was, this is supposed political donors who've influenced public policy. These are things that you and I don't necessarily see or even find out. And I believe that if the veil was lifted and we actually saw what really was going on, what was really happening, because just because you are a political leader in your country, that may serve the good of the country. But what if a neighboring country is not happy that you are in power? They will then become a donor to your to your political adversary and give them money to boost both of their attempts at politics. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's we've talked about the Conservatives because we've had so many years of them, and I think collectively people are sick of them. If you are not rich, I mean, if you're rich. The rich love them because they've served them, they've looked after them. We've pumped all this money in to keep the housing economy going, to keep your house prices going. House prices have never been so expensive. If you're a homeowner, you're laughing. If you've got several homes and you're renting them, you're laughing even more. Your house is going up in price and you're able to increase more money with rents. So it's a win-win. And I almost feel like if there was a political party, and I don't even think Labour would do it either, but if you were a political party that actually wanted to readdress the balance, you would 100% go into tackling the inequality that goes on in the world today. You would have to. You couldn't come into power and go, we're going to keep the status quo, everybody. It's going to stay as it is, but we're now in power. You will have to, if you vote these guys out, and I'm not saying, I am still not sure that they will be voted out. I'm not convinced.
You're crazy.
You think so?
You're crazy.
But I'm not convinced. There are lots of people. LD, there are lots of people that I've spoken to that have said they are staunch Conservative voters, and more importantly, they would not only vote because this is how I envision it to be. I don't think it's gonna be a landslide. I think that it could be hung, don't know, but I think what would happen is they would allow them to stay in power, just not with who's in power to stay in power. They might do a compromise, which is part of the reason why a few months ago I said to you, Cameron's going to be MP, going to go back to power. And I said it, I called it out. I said, Cameron will one day go back into power. The reason being was he lost his tenure because he ballsed up Brexit.
Yeah.
He took a gamble and he lost. And he had unfinished business. And he has positioned himself now in a place where he could potentially be the voice of safety. He could be the safe bet. He's been there before. He knows what he's doing.
You think that they would then turn around and have another change of leadership before the election?
No, not before. As a result of them, I think for them to. Do you remember when? Was it right? Do you remember? So we talked about it when the Conservatives, when there was a hung parliament, and the Conservatives and Labour was going to share leadership with the Lib Dems, which made more sense because they generally share more of the same political persuasions, right? They're closer than they are. And what they said was, we will join you, but Gordon Brown's got to go. And they were very clear on that. They were like, we don't mind sharing with you, but Gordon Brown's got to go. And Gordon Brown went, no. And so they went, okay. And they pivoted to the Conservatives. That's my understanding. I could be wrong. But my understanding was that that's what happened. And if that's the case, there is precedent that could happen again. This is what I mean. It could be a hung parliament. It could be that not enough people vote. Because you remember what I said to you? People that are able to vote, that are old enough and have all the credentials and need them to win, will vote. What other parties will need to do is get the I ain't going to vote, I don't care, I don't want to vote, none of them represent me. We need all of those and the young ones, all of them to vote, because then it will address the balance. But if they don't vote, we could get a 35% turnout.
Think about everything that we've been speaking about for the last few months about the state of this country.
I'm not convinced. That's the problem. The problem is we have complained about it a great deal, but how many people talk about stuff like how many conversations do you have like how we talk?
If you've got two functioning eyes in your head,
yeah, you'll know.
You look around what's going on in this country, and
there
you
are
still vote for Conservative.
No, they won't vote. That's the problem. I'm not saying they're going to vote for Conservative. I'm going to say they won't vote. But
all right, so all right. So let's call it today. What are you saying that what will be the result? I believe it's going to be a landslide.
Really, really low turnout. That's my worry. My worry is that we're going to get a ridiculously low turnout of voters, and the ones that do vote will vote enough, maybe not to get them past the post, but it will be enough that they won't have a majority over Labour. However, Labour could join with the next party, whether that be the Greens or the Lib Dems or whatever, to push them out. But we could potentially get into a situation where we're power sharing because of what's happened in Brexit, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in the economy. There's lots of things that are going to influence what is happening. But if you are a homeowner with a little bit of money in your pocket and you do not want to get taxed heavily or punished, and you want to keep inequality going,
if you are a homeowner, you just saw your mortgage jump.
No, a homeowner that is not a mortgage paying.
Right.
I'm talking
You've
a
got
baby
no
boomer.
Okay.
I'm talking the homeowner that has no, because you've got to remember, in a sense, they're the same. If you've got a mortgage, you're the same. We're the same. There's no differential. We're still being punished for trying to.
All right. So you've called it a low turnout.
I think low
leading
turnout,
to a hung parliament. And I'm saying I believe that the Tories will lose by a landslide. Yes.
Landslide.
Yes.
So what you're saying? So remember this. A landslide.
The loser owes the other person lunch. So yeah.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah. That would be good. Yeah, I like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am.
Hey, don't walk it back now. Don't walk it back now.
No. I'm listen, proud, strong. I'm wearing red. Listen, I'm going to be strong with my chest. If we can get the young people to come out and vote, if we can get them all registered and we can get them all fully, then maybe we might have a chance. But that still doesn't defeat the fact that £35 million of donation money is going to be used leading up to our election to try and keep the status quo going. There's a lot of money that these people will probably spend, and they will do it, and we will notice it. From now, we will notice adverts. Like things like sometimes the news will be blue or it'll be red, or there'll be lots of things that you won't even notice you're doing it because they're pumping things into your mind, so you think, oh, and you won't even know it. It's subliminal.
You briefly touched on it. I think the battleground is going to be technology,
social media.
Social media. Look at what they did with Cambridge Analytica and Brexit.
There we go.
Yeah, they used that to win elections around the world. By pumping out toxic propaganda in Kenya, for example. There was a big case that was opened in there to win them the elections. So I think we're going to see a lot of the social media play a big part in spreading propaganda.
As I said already, I believe that the issue isn't going to be, I believe the issue is going to be political will. And will we have enough effort? Will we have enough energy? Will we do enough to change the status quo? I don't know. I would like to see us do it. I think that it's important that we do, because if we don't, then we're going to have the divide, the inequality divide that we see right now is only going to get bigger. And obviously, you and I both want to see that redressed. We don't want
Of
that
course.
anymore.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so yeah, I jest with you and we joke. I want to see a better world. We're not seeing that right now. Hopefully, a new political party will have a better understanding, or have a little bit more clout to be able to make change. We don't know if they can do it either. But if we accept, if we accept what we see right now, that gives them the mandate to carry on doing what they're doing. Right. So, LD, again, as always, love having a good conversation with you. It's always good to talk about things that are in the news and that are topical. This was my choice was this week, and we talked about it, which was good.
Yep.
Any concluding comments before we head out?
I think reform is overdue, but I don't know if we're going to get it from either of the two big parties. But yeah, campaign finance is something that definitely needs to be looked at. If we look at what's happened over in America, look at the people who have been caught out insider trading because of their knowledge of policy. So then they've been able to trade on different shares and things like this. So we need to look at all of it as a whole. And yeah, I don't know whether we're going to get change from the two big parties. I don't know if they're going to bring that in.
This is part of what I wrote down as my I believe that it's not enough to say or accept that the system isn't working. But we know that. Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, they both said that the system isn't working. But what we need is someone to deliver. I wrote that reform, and I know we talk about we must reform, but reform to our
not the party reform as well.
No. That's a soundbite. Reform.
Exactly. That's what I'm just saying. It.
Reform to our political system needs to be made with the public, not just individual political parties and their, private benefactors. The decisions about the rules around elections should be made by independent bodies, not the government of the day. That's another thing we didn't even tackle on, to be honest with you. But the reforms that we have, they are going to need to suit the public, because if we don't do that, we are going to be destined to suffer another 4 or 5 years of what we're experiencing right now, and it is wrong. We can't do this. I don't think the system could survive another 4 or 5 years of this, because the gap between the rich and the poor, between those that have and have not, is getting wider. It's getting bigger every day. And young people who are growing up are losing hope. I think when you see these demonstrators in Cambridge and Oxford and all these other universities around the country, and they're actually, they at the moment, their attention is drawn to what's going on in Ukraine, Israel, and whatnot. But actually, it's on their own doorstep that they should actually be thinking that you are going to be the adults of tomorrow. You're the voting adults of tomorrow. But if you allow what's going on now, then your vote will mean nothing, if in fact they even do vote. So I'll leave it there, that if we want to make change, we need to do it now before it is too late. And I would many people would already say to you that it's already too late, but we have to do something, because if we don't, our children will be the ones that suffer. So on that note, thank you very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave some value to you. We are here most weeks where we talk about different subjects. We take it in turns, as you may have known. We take it in turns about different subjects to talk about. I've noticed that mine seems to be more political and yours seems to be more financial. Or was it the other way around? I can't remember now. But I want us to have as many topics about things that are important to us. Yeah. These discussions that we have are important to talk about. You may have it in your head. You may not even think about it. And you may not know of other people that talk about it. We're fortunate. I've known you many, many years. And I think from when we were in our early years, we were already talking about political things that we may not have understood, but we were already thinking along the lines of this doesn't make sense, and it's just followed us through the years. I wish we were doing these discussions years ago, you know. But
we did, but just on the phone.
Sorry?
We did, but just on the phone.
On the phone, yeah. And it was a conversation that once said, it's gone. Now these are stored for prosperity. So obviously, the day after the election, I'm going to find this video and replay what I just said. I'll either be victorious, if I am, I'll be sad.
yeah, exactly.
But we will see.
Me and you both.
I know. So guys, take care, and we will see you in the next video. Peace. Cue balloons. Yay!